Alright, so I'm replacing the motor mounts on my wife's '07 Trailblazer, and this is the driver's side. From every video I've seen so far, says that this is the most difficult side to do, so that's where I figured I'd start. And I've seen guys caught the PCM, which mounts here on these 4 studs, or 2 studs, and then there's bolts that go in the top, the upper top, 10mm. I've seen guys talk about removing the PCM and then being able to go down behind, that bracket, which is directly over the top bolt for the motor mount. However, a deep socket is needed to get that bolt off. The stud's too long on the top end, and by the time you get the deep socket in there, even with some swivel joints, you just don't have enough room to manipulate either your impact or your ratchet. If you look, let's see, you can't really see the top of the motor mount, but just above this bracket, or just below this bracket right here, sets that bolt for the motor mount. So what I'm gonna do, I can't find where this bracket ends going back in underneath the motor. I don't see any other visible bracket mounts, bolts to get this thing off. So what I'm gonna do, this is non-structural. I've made a mark here on the bracket, and I'm gonna drill a hole with a hole saw big enough to get my 18mm socket in, my deep well, and then just go straight down in through this bracket and right on top of the motor mount, and that should simplify things. I'll get back to you when I've got that completed. One other thing I want to make sure everybody's clear on is that when you take the PCM off and you drill through that bracket underneath the PCM to get to the top motor mount bolt, please note that you have a gas line right there next to where you're drilling. What I did was I lubricated my hole saw very well so that I'm not throwing any sparks towards the fuel line, number one. Number two, underneath that bracket there are several wires that kind of crisscross. Make sure you reach underneath that bracket and pull your wires towards the front of the motor before you start drilling your hole, so that way you're not cutting into any wiring harnesses that are located underneath that bracket. Don't want to cause any more headaches than you need. Hope this helps. Thanks. Alright, so here is after drilling a hole in that bracket that I was talking to you about. And it's hard to see, but now you can see now I'm directly over top of the top of the bolt for the motor mount. So now I can bring my extension right through this hole along with the socket and make a whole lot less work. So let's go ahead and proceed to the next step. I'm going to pull this motor mount. Alright, so I'm over here on the passenger side now, and a lot of videos I watch, guys talking about taking the airbox off. I don't see any reason to do that. And turn some light on here. Get down in there, right there alongside the air intake. And if you look straight down right there, that nut right there that you're looking at next to that wire connection, that's your top motor mount right there. Easily accessible. This is really not a hard job. At least I haven't run into any snags yet. We'll see. Get back with you later. Alright, so the passenger side bottom motor mount bolt, if you look through the chassis there, you can see the bolt, and your 18mm is not big enough to fit through this hole right here, so you got to get your 18 above the chassis, and then connect your extensions. Had me for a little bit. You just got to be a little smarter than the Chinaman that put it together. Alright, see you later. Alright, so we did we cut the motor mount bracket on the driver's side, and then we went over and did the passenger side. Got the motor mount in, left the bolts loose. Moved the jack over to the driver's side to get the driver's side motor mount in, and it still was just not quite enough. So what we did was we went back over to the passenger side where we still had both nuts a little loose. Tighten those up to cock the motor, because the driver's side is definitely much tighter to get into. So the passenger side, tighten the nuts down completely on the motor mount to cock the motor to the left if you're standing in front of the vehicle, and get a little bit more space between the top and bottom brackets for the driver's side motor mount. Driver's side motor mount's a pain in the ass for sure, but you can get it. You can definitely get it without taking out the brackets from the chassis.
Yeah, you got.
It's not a 1 hour job though. You can see much beer was involved. Okay, so just an overall review. The PCM, I took this off. 4 bolts, 2 on left, 2 on the right. Access the bracket that's just basically a cable holder. Drilled a hole through it for the driver's side. Bottom side is really pretty much accessible without having to do any extra work. The passenger side is also pretty much accessible, just going straight down through from the top side and then the bottom side. The only other thing that I didn't mention was that you need to pull the skid pan off of the bottom. Basically, if you were doing an oil change, you pull the skid pan or oil drip pan, whatever you want to call it, to actually, have a spot to put your jack underneath of the motor. Try and offset your jack as far to the left when you're doing the passenger side, as far to the right when you're doing the driver's side. And as I said before, crank down your passenger side bolts to offset the motor height a little bit for your driver's side. And that's it, folks. Motor mounts are done, and getting ready to fire her up. Oh, and by the way, folks, one other thing I didn't mention was the dealership wanted to charge me $1,000 to do the motor mount job. I bought them online for $53 from A1 Auto, and pretty much not your beginner task to do, but certainly not rebuilding a motor or anything like that. It took me 3 hours from start to finish to do both sides, and was working very, at a very relaxed pace. So it's not that much, but like I said, the dealership wanted to charge $1,000 for it. Motor mounts were $53, and I had 3 hours of my time. So you decide what you want to do.